Hey guys, welcome to a very cold South Africa. It's probably the coldest day so far. For those interested, there have been a couple of you saying that you want to, where can you read the Van Gogh letters? Well, there's this book, A Life in Letters. To be honest, I don't know if you can see it. Does it look like it's been read? I don't know if you really need the book when you've got a website like this available. But what is kind of quite interesting, if we turn to sort of the around about the time period where we are now, it says here 29 September 1888. This is a letter 691. So Van Gogh wrote about 900 letters. We are around about at 700 already, right? And so that should give you an idea where we are in his, not only in his correspondence, but we're reaching really the end game in his life. He wrote comparatively few letters compared to 1888. In 1889, bear in mind he was in the asylum, there were months where he wrote quite a lot. And then in the last 2 months of his life, he again wrote a shitload of letters. But basically, right now, in the end of his life, that's when he wrote the most letters. Come to me, come up, up. Timmy wants to be the star of the show. Timmy has an alter ego. Like you get Clark Kent and Superman, you get Timmy, and then you also have Indiana Schnauzer. This is Indiana Schnauzer, and when he takes his coat off and is in the vehicle, then he's um, what was his name again? What was it? Inspector, not Clouseau. He had some other name, like a kind of an exotic name. Senior Holmes. That was his name. So Senior Holmes is assuming the position. Would you like to lie down? There we go. Okay. Timmy, your ASMR is about to begin. Let's see who's here. Robbie Robbins says, "What's the emblem on your hat?" Is there anyone who's able to read it? Shall I come a little closer? Is there anyone who's able to see what it says? Maybe if you're looking on a television set, you can make it out. Stephanie H., it's good to see you for a change. I hope you had a good walk in the woods. Yeah, so this is Indiana Schnauzer, but when he's on a case, then he's Senior Holmes. He's not it's sort of a foreign or some kind of Italian or Spanish detective. Okay, so anyway, the answer is this is Gryffindor. This is a beanie that I got at Universal Studios in Los Angeles, and it belongs to the house that Harry Potter and Ron and was Hermione also part of Gryffindor? I think she was. Or was she Hufflepuff? Can't quite remember. Biggles. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're gonna jump right in. I hope you guys have voted. Actually, sorry, I hope you guys haven't voted because you're really only gonna know the answer to this as we go through the letters. So I'm gonna put a link to the letters in chat. And then we're gonna get going. I don't know if it was called Harry Potter World. It was just the Harry Potter thing in Universal Studios. We also went on the ride. That was also quite funny. Okay, shall we get going? So somewhere in middle September, Van Gogh writes to his sister, and he says the following: "Your letter gave me a great deal of pleasure, and today I have the leisure to calmly reply." Now, just those words should already be giving you an idea of his mood. Do you want to if you're not sure of the kind of person you are, you're not sure what you think about, if you just highlight some of the words you say in an average conversation, that is giving away some of your sentiments and emotions. And so he talks about pleasure, leisure, and calm. He's saying, I can calmly reply. And so the question surrounding this time of the month is Van Gogh becoming mentally unstable? Is he becoming emotionally unstable? Is he going into a good place? Is he going off the rails, or what sort of place is he at? In other words, the question we kind of want to ask is, does he start to struggle in whatever way before Gauguin is even on the scene, or does Gauguin basically really rub him the wrong way, and things go to pieces after his arrival? In other words, is Vincent his own worst enemy, or did Gauguin have something to do with his unraveling? Of course, we've only just touched on the first two lines. Let's figure this out. He says, so your visit to Paris was quite a success. I should very much like you to come here next year too. Why do you think he's saying that? He was saying at this point he wants Gauguin to come and see him. He wants his brother to come and see him when the studio's ready, right? He wants Gauguin, and so it's Gauguin, his brother, and his sister. Why do you think he's inviting all of these people? Why do you think that's going on? Another thing you could say is, why do you think he's writing a letter almost every single day? I think another way of putting it is, if he wasn't writing a letter every day or every night, then he probably would have been busy with something or someone else, but he isn't, right? Anyway, he says, at the moment, I'm furnishing the studio in order to always be ready to put somebody up. So he's kind of in a situation where he's quite lonely, and he's starting to create a kind of Airbnb essentially, and that is making him quite excited. It's this idea that he's going to have company, basically. He says, and he's basically saying, you could stay here, Theo could stay here, Gauguin could stay here, Bernard could stay here. Basically, anyone can stay here, and it'll be better than being kind of by myself, far from people that I know. He says, because there are two little rooms upstairs looking onto a very public garden, and from which one can see the sunrise in the morning. I will arrange one of these rooms to accommodate a friend, and the other will be for me. He doesn't quite say here that he's giving the better room to the friend. He doesn't quite say that. He says, in it, I want nothing but straw-bottomed chairs and a table and a whitewood bed, the walls whitewashed, the tiles red. But I want a great wealth of portraits and painted studies of figures in it, which I intend to do in the course of time. I already have one to begin with, the portrait of a young Belgian impressionist. That's this one. And you kind of get a sense that Van Gogh is already in a little bit of a fairy tale place, just in the sense that he paints this figure with a sort of golden hue, and then against like a starry sort of background, right? You don't sort of have a formal background of, well, what would be in the background? A wall or a bookshelf or a table, or the outline of a landscape, as you have with Dr. Gachet. You kind of have a look at the little stars. You kind of have a somewhat fairy tale thing going on. And so this is one of the pictures he's hanging in his home. And anyway, he goes on to say, I painted him a little like a poet, the head fine and nervous, standing out against a background of deep ultramarine night sky with a twinkling of stars. That twinkling of stars is something that is getting more and more caught up on. You sort of get a sense that he quite likes the idea of whatever by night. And there is another example, right? Cafe Terrace on the Place du Forum at night, right? He's getting quite caught up in how magical places can look at night. And I don't know whether this has got something to do with, as far as I know, they didn't have electricity at that time. But I know electricity was starting to come online. But certainly there was a need for electricity, but this would all be candlelight. It probably did seem quite delightful. Maybe if you've grown up on the farm, this sort of thing does look quite magical. Anyway, he says, however, I want to have the other room just as elegant with a walnut bedstead and a blue coverlet, and all the rest, the dressing table as well as the cupboard, in dull walnut. In this very tiny room, I want to put in a Japanese manner at least 6 very large canvases. Now, if you think about what's going on, he's writing a letter to his sister, but he's kind of just talking out loud. He's kind of excitedly sharing his thoughts about the house. And you kind of get the idea that he doesn't even have anyone to talk to say, wow, look at what I'm going to do with this room. And that's going to be so exciting. And so he's writing to his sister in order to have someone to talk to about how excited he is about not just the room, but the possibilities that are in store for this this house, and of course for him as well. In other words, in terms of these rooms are symbolic for some kind of future occupant, and that is making him quite excited. He's creating the surroundings for some unknown person, and that is what he's kind of sharing. Silent Murmur says he wants his favorite yellows and blues in the new house. Yeah. Now, can you also think about, do you also want to imagine this idea that if you're an artist that is becoming interested in certain colors, and now you're literally going to eat, sleep, and not necessarily drink, but, well, certainly not eat either, but you're going to eat and sleep and wake up inside those colors. Talk about an immersive experience. What I mean is, if you've gotten really captivated by yellow, for example, and then you paint your home yellow, the inside actually wasn't yellow, but I'm just saying that is going to be a constant reminder. Maybe not that you need reminding, but maybe constant stimulus that this is the new phase I'm going into in terms of my life. And that must also be quite exciting, right? Yeah, he's looking forward to the future. Zircon says the whole gang is here. Cool. Good to have you guys here. Thanks for being at such short notice. Okay. All we're doing is we're trying to get into his heart space a little bit, get into his head space a little bit, get a sense of how he's feeling emotionally and how this whole roller coaster is starting to sort of develop, just how high it's going to climb before the drop. So he says, that the Japanese instinctively look for contrast and eat sweet peppers, salty candy, fried ices, and iced fried things. So it follows, according to the same system, that in the large room there should only be very small pictures. And a very small room, one should hang very large ones. Interesting. Not sure I agree with that. I hope the day will come when I shall be able to show you this beautiful country here. Then he says, I've just finished a canvas representing the interior of a night cafe illuminated by lamps. A few poor night wanderers are asleep in a corner. The room is painted red, and there under the gaslight, the green billiard table casts an immense shadow on the floor. There are 6 or 7 different reds in this canvas, from blood red to delicate pink, contrasting with as many pale or deep greens. I sent Theo a sketch of it today, which is like a Japanese crepe print. Now, I think what this painting is starting to show is an emotional intensity building, if that makes sense. Like if you want to move away from his words and move away from his letters and say, okay, what is going on in his art right now? That blood red that he's referring to is definitely tuning into, it's definitely resonating with the emotional intensity he's feeling. He's feeling passionate, he's feeling happy, he's feeling positive, right? All those things. Um, and I think it's important to say unusually so. I mean, he's quite an intense dude generally, but he's feeling quite passionate. He's feeling quite strongly about whatever he's feeling, and that particular artwork really shows that. I mean, if you compare that, if you compare this, right, to this is painted around the same time, and you can tell it's less of an intense work, right? This is, I guess, a more romantic, softer, gentler, um, more beautiful, elegant picture, and it's touching on different emotions of, I guess, there's a bit of a more of a social thing going on here, right? Where you see couples and you see people sitting together, whereas this is kind of more, whatever it is, it's more stark. People sitting by themselves, or there is a couple there, but this is more like there's something intense and disturbing going on here, right? And he talks about it's a kind of setting where someone might commit a crime, right? And you see all the alcohol all over, alcohol, absinthe, whatever, all of those bottles, right? Whereas over here, it kind of seems more of a friendly situation, people having meals together. It's very civilized, right? And that I think also shows to some extent the spectrum of Van Gogh's emotions. They go from, let's say, I don't want to say reasonable, but from basically, um, I guess, realistic and realistic to some kind of extreme. Anyway, he says, Theo wrote me that he had just given you Japanese prints. This is surely the practical way to arrive at an understanding of the direction which painting in bright, clear colors has taken at present. The other thing just to look at in terms of these paintings is he's playing with color. Yeah, he's playing with the contrast of yellow and blue, right? He's playing with color, right? That's yellow and blue, and this one is red and green, right? Essentially red and green, those colors above all. And so it's kind of a mistake to look at this picture exclusively for the content in terms of who is in it and what are they doing. You actually really want to look at the color more than anything else. It's a way to express color and contrast, right? Does that make sense? And he's doing kind of the same thing with his own home. He's painting his home yellow against the blue night sky, and he's going to mention that in one of his letters. Okay, so he says, for my part, I don't need Japanese pictures here, for I always tell myself that here I am in Japan, which means that I have only to open my eyes and paint the effect of what is right in front of me. One does wonder if Van Gogh had ever gone abroad, if he'd met some wealthy person who'd recognized his talent and said, hey, where do you want to go? Would he have gone to Japan? Would he have gone to the USA? Would he have gone to Tahiti? Where would he have gone to Madagascar? And if he had, how could that have changed his art? I mean, if the south of France did so much, what could any other place have done? Then he says, have you seen a very little mask of a smiling fat Japanese woman at Theo? It is surprisingly expressive, that little mask. Did you think of taking a painting of mine there for yourself? I hope so. And I'm very curious to know which one you chose. I'm inclined to think that you took the white cabins surrounded by green plants under a blue sky, which I made at Seine-Marie on the coast of the Mediterranean. So he's thinking or hoping that his sister took this painting as a gift or took it home for herself. One wonders whether she did. He says, I ought to have gone back to Saint Marie's again. If Bria was here, she could give some advice on how to pronounce that. But he says, as there are now people on the beach, but never mind, I have such a lot to do here. Just those words, never mind, I have such a lot to do here. Do you think he's in a good place? Do you think about that last picture that he executed? Do you think it's one of his better artworks? Do you think he's on a roll? Do you think he's struggling? Do you think he's suffering? Silent Murmur says it would change him a lot if the environment had his favorite yellows and blues. Okay, so he goes on to say, at present, I absolutely want to paint a starry sky. It's quite a statement. You can imagine those words appearing next to Starry Night in an art gallery. You can imagine someone like putting that right there. Yeah, he does seem happy, right? I agree. So he says, it often seems to me that night is still more richly colored than the day, having hues of the most intense violets, blues, and greens. If you think about it, this is almost like a poem. Think about these lines as a poem, right? I'm going to read it in one go, but think of it not as words in a letter, but lines from a poem. At present, I absolutely want to paint a starry sky. It often seems to me that night is still more richly colored than the day, having hues of the most intense violets, blues, and greens. If only you pay attention to it, you will see that certain stars are lemon yellow, others pink or green, blue and forget-me-not brilliance. And without my expatiating on this theme, it is obvious that putting little white dots on the blue-black is not enough to paint a starry sky. Isn't that beautiful? Right? He's saying, can you see that it's just not enough to put a little white dot on a blue-black sky? I want to show the brilliance. I want to show the twinkling. I want to show that sort of electric vibrating movement. You know, if you think about the Milky Way, it does actually move. It wheels around you. And he doesn't want to just paint a little dot. He wants to share that brilliance that he's feeling and that he's thinking, right? And this is a really good paragraph that shows what he's thinking and feeling and what he's trying to convey. He's trying to say that one little dot, and if you look at the picture over my shoulder, let's bring it into perspective. If you look at the picture over my shoulder, it's kind of saying how it's so such an insult to what a star really is in the night sky, just to put a little white dot there. I want to show how it makes me feel. You know, I want to share the liveliness of it. And you know, if you in your life, if you've ever seen a comet or a meteor or some kind of celestial event, all the more you want to depict the sky as something living, right? And so that's what he's trying to do. He's feeling very alive, and at night he sort of looks out, and the night seems somehow even more alive than the day, right? Have you ever had that feeling? Sometimes when you're driving in a vehicle or it's late at night, maybe it's raining or you're driving or something, and there is kind of like a fireworks display. Sometimes you see, I mean, I've seen Halley's Comet and that something Levi 9, and I've seen meteors and so on. I don't know, but he's very aware um, of lights in darkness, and maybe it's also living in a little town compared to living in a little, I mean, I'm sure he had it in Newnan, like in these little farmyard villages, but in a bigger little town, it probably felt a lot more lively with lights in the buildings going up and then also into the sky. Anyway, he says, and this is what I wanted to make the title of this video, but I didn't have enough letters. I wanted it to be this full thing. My house here is painted the yellow color of fresh butter. That's how he sees it. My house is colored. My house is painted. My house feels like butter. Looks like butter. It's the color of fresh butter. Outside with raw green shudders, almost like the green of new leaves, right? It stands in the full sunlight on a square which has a green garden with plane trees, oleanders and acacias, and it is completely whitewashed inside, and the floor is made of red bricks. And over it, the intensely blue sky. So this is what I wanted to contrast. Outside, the yellow color of fresh butter. Over it, the intensely blue sky. And then he says, there I can live and breathe, think and paint. Now you must bear in mind, he's not actually, sorry about that, he's not actually living there right now. He lives somewhere else, and the house is becoming a symbol. The house is becoming a symbol of um, a place he's gonna belong to. He's gonna be anchored to a place that's gonna represent him, a place that he's going to represent. All of it's really exciting for someone who's kind of led a vagabond existence, never really had anywhere to call home in a sense. And so again, when you ask that question about mental or emotional stability, if he talks about there I can live and breathe, think and paint, it kind of seems to be saying there I'm going to be able to be stable and settled and safe and secure, right? Right? But he's not quite there yet. He's setting that up. He's setting up that place, that space, but he's not there yet. He's not living there yet. And so in a way, he's starting to build up a fairy tale about what his life's going to be. And to some extent, that is making him feel happy. And to some extent, that is preoccupying him. And yeah, I guess that's the basic thing, right? Sharon says, my best friend forever, or is that my boyfriend's friend? Lives in Zurich, so Vienna's on my list. Zircon says, I feel happiest at home. Zircon, I must say, I'm feeling right now, I think the unhappiest I've ever felt in my home. I'll talk to you guys about that a little bit later. Snow Lion says, the descriptions in his letters are fantastic. Brian says, along with painting, he could have been a writer for sure, for sure. Best friend forever. Okay. Yeah, I am. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, but what I found very ironic, and I've often compared myself to Van Gogh, and I think people think that I'm saying that like one day my work's going to be world famous. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying I identify with his struggle, where it's almost like no one understands you. No one. Uh, I don't know. It's not just that. It's this very tough struggle, and you think that hard work's going to overcome the sort of entropy around you, and all that it actually does is it makes people. I'm talking about the people immediately around you. All that it does is it makes them think that you are stranger than if you work less hard. If you were just an ordinary person that they didn't understand or something like that. So that's the part that I identify with. I identify with working really hard, and just sort of thinking that somewhere along the line, life will get a little easier, I guess, and there'll be a little bit of recognition somewhere along the line. And I'm not talking about in America, I'm talking about here. And of course, I live in an area where not too many people speak English. And so I guess in a way, I'm a bit like an outsider, like Van Gogh was as well. He's a Dutchman living in France. And so although he can speak French and he can write French, the people just don't see him as French. They kind of look at him like, let's decide what we think about you. And yeah, so that's the part that I definitely identify with. And I guess I had a similar little fairy tale in the sense of when I went to America, I just sort of thought, I've been writing about America for so long. I've been doing YouTube videos. I'd like to go to America and see America and meet some of the people that I've engaged with. Like I've met Stephanie and um, Isimko Valinsky and some others, right? I'd like to meet you guys, and I'd like to see some of the places that I've written about, but also see some of the places that I haven't written about. And but like this idea of I want to kind of go to this place that I feel like I know so well. Meanwhile, while I'm doing that, um, I was honestly in a battle that all started with an argument over a tree, where someone was cutting one tree down, then another tree down, then another tree down. And I'm now trying to plan my trip to America. So I'm kind of thinking, I need to do this, I need to do that. Meanwhile, someone's sort of coming around to where I live and cutting trees down and just kind of interfering. And then basically it's like a situation of him telling me, do you know what, you're a nothing, like you have no say whatsoever here. And it's like this weird thing of I worked so hard during the Murdoch case, and I've built up one channel, I've written 100 books, but right where I live, there's someone who's basically saying with utter conviction, can you not see that you are absolutely nothing here? You have no authority, and don't tell me not to cut down a tree. I will tell you have no authority here. And so the joke has been, while I've been in America and in the run up to that, not only has this person been trying to convince me that I'm totally a nobody, whatever, but he's been trying to get other people to kind of join in that. And that's exactly what they've done. And it's just so weird. It's like, that's why I sort of say I really identify with Van Gogh, because I don't know. And then what is the answer? Isn't the answer that you should, like, because Van Gogh was actually ultimately thrown out of the Yellow House. He's not even in there yet. But the end of the story was that the people thought he was very strange. That they never accepted him, and they ultimately didn't only throw him out of the Yellow House, they threw him out of all. Right? Isn't the lesson in that anecdote, leave of your own accord? Don't wait till you get thrown out, don't wait till you get kicked out. Pay attention to how people are treating you and kind of go, okay, well, like I want to paint over here, and I want these are my ideas, but I see what you are thinking and I see what you're saying. Okay, I'm going to get the message and leave. If Van Gogh had done that, wouldn't he have lived maybe happily ever after? Wouldn't he have kept his ear at least? And I think the same thing kind of applies to me. I've been fighting to keep my dog. I've been threatened. We're going to get rid of your dog. Don't, if you argue with me, I'm going to get rid of your dog. And the same thing. Maybe you should go somewhere where people don't hate dogs and don't feel that trees need to be obsessively cut down in case they grow, right? the irony of the whole thing is that I set up a channel called Team Peachtree, and just down the road from me was a big peach tree, probably 10 years old, if not older, with a stem as thick as my leg. And that tree was just cut down. And the reason given afterwards, oh, sorry, you made a mistake. Sorry, you cut the tree down by mistake. Yeah. So it's from that perspective that I'm saying I really identify with Van Gogh. You sort of feel like you're dealing with imbeciles. You sort of feel like you're dealing with they obviously feel the same way. They feel like they're dealing with an idiot. Um, you know, what does he do at home all day? Um, how come? And I mean, obviously, I'm in a right routine now. I work proper hours, but sometimes when I'm covering cases, I work at night to cover American cases and I sleep in the day. And I think they must be sort of sitting in their homes thinking, oh, what a lazy guy this is. He just sleeps all day. Does he even pay rent? What does he do? He just walks his dog and he is the laziest guy I've ever met, kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's that kind of ignorant judgment that you kind of got to deal with, right? So anyway, all I'm saying is when I was in America and people were saying, like Eisen was saying, wow, I'm so honored to be with this international or this famous writer. And some of you guys seemed like a little bit starstruck. I'm kind of thinking, yeah, I could do with a little bit of that back home. I could do with a little bit of that back home. And anyway, um, Intercoastal Carissa says, I'm a night owl. I paint and write. I've quoted that exact Van Gogh quote before about the liveliness of the night. Zircon says, I'm a tree hugger. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to this letter. Enough about me. So he says, there in that house, I can live and breathe, think and paint. He says, and it seems to me that I might go further into the south rather than go back up to the north again. Well, that's not going to happen. He's not going to go further south. I don't know where he was thinking of. I don't know if he was thinking of Greece or, I mean, he was pretty far south as it is, Algeria, I don't know, or Madagascar. But anyway, he says, I am greatly in need of a strong heat so that my blood can circulate normally. Here I feel much better than I did in Paris. Here is once again his own diagnosis, his own giving himself a what do they call it? Not a full bill of health. What's that thing about a bill of health? Can't think of the thing. Clean bill of health, isn't it? What's that saying? Isn't it a clean bill of health? Clean bill of health, a declaration or confirmation that someone is healthy. That's kind of what he's giving himself, right? Do you agree? And he's saying, I feel much better here than I did in Paris. He's not saying I feel worse, right? And he means physically, I feel healthy. And he's saying, maybe I must go even further south where there's heat, right? And, and I think he's also thinking about dealing with winter, how, because he seems to struggle in winter. Maybe, some people catch colds and they have infections worse in winter than in summer. Well, he has the same problem. He says, you see, I can hardly doubt that you on your part would also like the South enormously. The fact is that the sun has never penetrated us people of the North enough. And I've always found it very hard traveling from South Africa, where the weather's so warm and sunny. Almost everywhere else is rainier, colder, grayer, cloudier. California's a good in comparison, but I don't know if I could ever live in the Netherlands just because of that point. I struggled to live in the UK because it's so cold and rainy for such a long part of the year. I was, I was. Silent Murmur says they destroy entire crops to spite the farmer, yet they have a food shortage. Clean bill of health, that's it. That's it. Thanks, guys. Okay, so he says, it is already a few days since I started writing this letter, and now I will continue it. In point of fact, I was interrupted these days by my toiling on a new picture, right? So it seems like it's something he doesn't do very often. He says, I started writing this letter, but then I stopped because I was painting this. And you kind of get the idea he didn't paint this in one go, that he actually spent quite a while working on this, trying to what's the word, paint a decent picture. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a much better executed picture in terms of the geometry. The geometry of this picture is sensible, and it's less cartoonish than the Night Cafe. Do you agree? This is kind of a sort of picture that I wouldn't mind hanging in my home, and I think a hotel might want to hang it in. I'm talking about when it is painted, might want to hang it in their foyer or whatever, but not so much this one. This picture is not a very sophisticated picture in a sense. There's the contrast, but it's a picture that's full of restlessness, and it's sort of agitated, right? It's quite interesting in this picture how he creates that same sort of halo effect around these lights, as if to convey the same sentiment about the night sky. Like, I don't want to just paint a light. I want to paint the vibrating, the movement of life, and the reality that is sort of in motion, that is animated. He's trying to sort of animate his picture, and so he doesn't want to just paint a light in the same way he doesn't want to just paint a star. He wants to paint that sort of shimmering, flickering thing about these lights, right? But anyway, it definitely put a lot more effort into this execution, and as a result, it's quite a good execution. There is actually something, I don't know if you agree, something faintly Goghanesque about this picture. It doesn't have that thick impasto, and in a weird way, this is a picture that's not very Van Gogh-like. It doesn't have very much of those little lines. There's a little bit of it there with those cobbles, but it doesn't really have much of those idiosyncratic Van Gogh little bars or little dot squares or whatever, right? You know what I'm talking about? And so he's spent a little bit more time on it, and then he says, what does he say? On the terrace, there are the tiny figures of drinkers. An immense yellow lantern illuminates the terrace, the facade, and the sidewalk, and even casts its light on the pavement of the streets, which takes a pinkish violet tone. The gables of the house on the street, stretching away under a blue sky spangled with stars, are dark blue or violet with a green tree. Here you have a night picture without black in it, done with nothing but beautiful blue and violet and green and lemon yellow. He doesn't just say yellow, it's lemon yellow, or it's butter yellow, right? It's not just a sky with stars in it, spangled with stars, almost like the stars are making a noise, almost like they're twanging like a guitar string, right? When I went to Hull the very first time, so when I arrived, I was fortunate enough to be sort of, what's the word, chaperoned through all. Um, there was a girl on the train who offered to show me the route to my Airbnb, and we actually passed this cafe like on the way to where I needed to go. It was really quite magical because I totally didn't expect it. One minute you were walking through this beautiful old town, and the next you walk into a Van Gogh portrait and then out of it again. It was quite an extraordinary experience, also quite a magical experience. And of course, that was in the day. I would go back there at night and go and have a look at it. He says, it amuses me enormously to paint the night right on the spot, right? That's quite an interesting word he uses. He says he's amused by it. I don't think he sits there laughing. I think he's very caught up. He's very inspired. I think that's kind of what he means. But you get the sense that he's really happy, that he's in a positive place, that he's looking forward to the future, that he's very hopeful and very energized, right? Just look at those words. It amuses me enormously to paint the night right on the spot. So again, do you think he's in an emotionally unstable place right now? And I suppose you could argue that if you unrealistically hopeful or unrealistically happy, that you are emotionally unstable. But I suppose you could also say you're at the top of that stability. I mean, if you were miserable but realistic, would that be stable? So, but it's an interesting conversation. Yeah, it's when they happen when you least expect it. Okay, so he goes on to say, they used to draw and paint the picture in the daytime after the sketch, but I find satisfaction in painting the thing immediately. And that is one of the things that makes Van Gogh quite a unique artist. He doesn't paint from memory, he doesn't paint from, although he does project some things that are in his mind. Certainly, I mean, think about the Night Cafe. But he likes to be in the real moment, painting the moment, almost like the moment of creation, standing there and capturing that magic as it's sort of unfolding, and feeling the energy around him, right? And I can certainly attest to that when you walking around with the idea of taking photos of the landscape. It's totally different than when you just drive through the landscape. There's something totally different from where you are just a passenger to where you are awake and alert to the special effects of the sky and the sun and rocks and whatnot. It's almost like there's magic around the next corner, and if you blink, you'll miss it, kind of thing. He says, of course, it's true that in the dark I may mistake a blue for a green, a blue lilac for a pink lilac, for you cannot distinguish the quality of a hue very well. But it is the only way to get rid of the conventional night scenes with their poor sallow whitish light, even a simple candle gives us the richest yellows and orange tints. Isn't this a really beautiful poetic letter, right? He says, when even a simple candle gives us the richest yellows and orange tints. I think that's something that you might struggle to convince South Africans of, because there's a lot of power failures here. Not invariably, when the power goes out, the candles come on. I don't have that problem because I've put in solar power, but it's kind of a situation where when the lights go out, they put a candle on. I don't know whether South Africans would say, "Oh wow, we love candles. Candles give us the richest yellows and orange tints." I don't know if they would say that. Um, I think more. I think you'd have more teenagers here saying, "It's so amazing having solar power here, because when the power goes out everywhere else, my cell phone stays on and it gives the richest yellows and orange tints when I'm going through Instagram or whatever." Sorry, I'm being a bit sarcastic. Okay, so he goes on to say, I also made a new portrait of myself, a study in which I look like a Japanese. So there he's painting himself, and that is definitely quite weird. I mean, he's a ginger dude, and he seems to be trying to appear Chinese, which he kind of does. I wonder whether he'd had a haircut there. But anyway, that is how he sees himself at this point in sort of mid-September 1888. And of course, he's got his ear. You'll notice the other pictures that he paints are from another perspective. It says, so far you have not told me whether you have read Bellamy by Guy de Maupassant and what in general you think of his talent now. I say this because the beginning of Bellamy happens to be a description of a starlight night in Paris with the brightly lighted cafes of the boulevard. So I think what's a really interesting um, line of thought to take is how on earth or why on earth or where on earth did Van Gogh get this idea that stars are so lively? And I think the answer is possibly from books, because bear in mind, telescopes are now becoming into vogue, and they recognizing that stars aren't just stars, that they are galaxies and planets and whatever supernovas. It's not just artists that are recognizing that, but also writers. And so when a writer is describing something, there's a little bit more effort to describe the vault above a city, right? And it's now not just pricked with stars. The stars are shimmering, well, because we know that they shimmer, because we know that they are wheeling galaxies and whatnot. And so isn't that where he draws his inspiration from for this the intrigue and the beauty and the drama that is in a night scene? Well, in books like this one by Bellamy, and the descriptions of the starlight night, I think he means starlit night in Paris, right? And that's what he's trying to convey with the picture he's just painted. He's trying to show a starlight night in all with the brightly lighted cafes of all, right? That's what he's trying to do here. He's trying to recreate what he's been reading about happening in Paris where he is. Does that make sense? Then he says, and this is approximately the same subject I just painted. Wow, great minds think alike. I didn't know he was going to say that, and then he just did. Right? He says, speaking of Guy de Maupassant, I want to tell you that I very much admire what he does, and I strongly urge you to read everything that he has written. You ought to read Zola, de Maupassant, de Goncourt as completely as possible in order to get something of a clear insight into the modern novel. Have you read Balzac? I'm reading him again here. So that's the other thing Van Gogh's doing, is not just feeling the night and feeling nature and seeing color, is also reading, and that is activating his imagination. And the reason Van Gogh, and I think it's very underappreciated, the reason Van Gogh is such a great writer is because he's such a voracious reader. And I can say the same about myself. I'm not saying I'm a great writer, just I was a voracious reader as a child. And when I was at school and uh, my teachers would grade my essays quite highly, and other kids who did very well in all their subjects but not in essay writing, they'd come to me and they'd say, how can I improve my essay marks? And I said, read more, right? Improve your vocabulary. And that's exactly what he is doing. He says, my dear sister, it is my belief that it is actually one's duty to paint the rich and magnificent aspects of nature. That would also be a great title for this episode. It is my belief that it is actually one's duty to paint the rich and magnificent aspects of nature. And I guess I could say when I traveled through America that I sort of felt, I don't know if I would say I felt duty bound, but I felt very inspired and very committed to trying to capture the rich and magnificent scenes that I passed through. And I think I achieved that, and I'd love to do it again. He says we need gaiety and happiness, hope and love. Now, again, if you look at those sentiments, he spoke right in the beginning about, he said, great deal of pleasure. I have the leisure to calmly reply. That's how he's feeling. That's his state of mind. Yeah, he kind of repeats that. It sort of resonates again where he says, he talks about happiness, talks about hope, talks about love. That is the sort of emotional mirror in a way that he's reflecting, right? Okay, he goes on to say, the more ugly, old, mean, ill, poor I get, the more I want to take my revenge by producing a brilliant color, well arranged, resplendent. Jewelers too get old and ugly before they learn how to arrange precious stones properly. By the way, this is the title of the previous episode. I obviously thought that we'd get as far as this, and we didn't. Anyway, jewelers too get old and ugly before they learn how to arrange precious stones properly. And arranging the colors in a painting in order to make them vibrate and to enhance their value by their contrast is something like arranging jewels properly or designing costumes. So can you see here he's saying it? I'm trying to make the colors vibrate. I'm trying to enhance the value of the colors by contrasting them. He's not just looking at something and painting something. There's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot that he's trying to do, right? Whether he always succeeds is another question. I mean, he's certainly got some sophisticated ideas. How he actually executes those in his art, isn't always that impressive. And that is one of the reasons why I stopped painting myself. I was drawing and sketching and painting along with my brother, and I just eventually felt the things I'm trying to communicate are just too complicated and sophisticated and elaborate and detailed and extensive to do on a flat thing. And I thought, to do that, you really must, to paint something and someone stands in front of your painting for like an hour, like they're reading a book, that must take some talent. And when I was walking through the art galleries, jogging sometimes with Stephanie H, but when I was walking through the art galleries in New York with Stephanie H and Stephanie L, I did kind of think to myself, you need to actually pause and let the painting talk to you. Let the the execution of the painting, so the painting actually being painted, try and see that firing up and try and just get a sense of it besides just looking at it flatly. And it's a little bit difficult to do when you're in a room full of people and there's a time limit and whatever, but that is what one needs to try to do. I suppose you don't necessarily have to stand in front of the original picture. You could just put a picture, from the internet and look at it, but preferably you'd like to see the real picture without a pane of glass in front of it, and no one carrying cans of tomato anywhere near you. It's getting tough to look at art these days, yeah, without without worrying about what's going on around you. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Thanks, Sircon. Simple is good. Okay. Right. So he says, you will see that by making a habit of looking at Japanese pictures, you will love to make up bouquets and do things with flowers all the more. I must finish this letter now if I want to get it off today. I shall be very happy to have the picture of Mother that you speak of, so don't forget to send it to me. Give my dearest love to Mother. I often think of you too, and it pleases me very much that you know our life a little better now. I'm afraid Theo will feel too lonely now, but he will be visited by a Belgian Impressionist painter one of these days. the one I told you about at the beginning of this letter, who's going to spend some time in Paris. And there will be a lot of other painters who will return to Paris with the studies they did during the fine season. I embrace you and mother, yours, Vincent. And so he's still 35 years old at this time. Let's see if we can get through two more letters at least. This is a letter to Theo, and as I say, is approaching about his 700th letter at this point. My dear Theo, probably I shall hear from you tomorrow morning, but I have time to write tonight, and the week has been rather eventful. I expect to go live in the house tomorrow, so that's actually quite a significant milestone. And so we kind of want to ask the question, when he goes into the house, what changes? Does he get even more caught up in what's happening? Does his art go up another gear? Is he able to sleep? Isn't he able to sleep, right? Um, Stephanie says, almost wish we had a ticket to view the painting in peace for a few minutes. Yeah. Maybe you can like get a ticket for $500 that allows you to just stand in front of it for an hour after closing time. Iceland, good to see you here. Busy day. Okay. Okay, so he says, I bought some more things and I've still more to add to them, and I'm only speaking of what is strictly necessary. You must again send me 100 francs instead of 50. If I reckon 50 francs to myself for the past week and deduct them from the 300 you sent, all that is left, even with another extra 50 francs, is no more than the exact price of the two beds. So you will see that in spite of that, I've already bought many other things beside the beds and the bedding. I've already spent the greater part of the 50 francs for the week, and I've partly economized on both beds by having one of them somewhat plainer. I'm convinced that in the end we shall do well by furnishing the studio, and I already feel freer in my work and less harried by unnecessary annoyances than I have been. So here you have him, and I don't know whether he's bullshitting Theo. I mean, he needs more money from Theo, so I don't know whether he's, blowing smoke up Theo's ass, but he's basically saying, I already feel freer in my work. And I tend to believe him. I don't know whether you guys feel the same way. Like if you think about the this this painting, the Cafe Terrace, that is quite a free and beautiful artwork. It's one of his best. I would say this is one of the top 10 Van Gogh artworks. It's very recognizable, very well proportioned. It's very well done, right? And so I tend to agree. He is feeling freer in his work, right? um, and less harried by unnecessary annoyances than I have been. Only if, as I hope, I take more pains with the style and quality of my work, it will go a little more slowly, or rather, I shall have to keep the pictures with me longer. I wonder if I've got a picture of, I think I might actually have a picture of myself um, with that particular artwork. I know I have one. I'm just not sure if I'm going to be able to find it sort of at short notice. I know where it is on the other computer. I just don't quite see it here. I wonder whether if I just do this. There it is. It's quite a miserable photo, but nonetheless. So there's a picture of me standing in front of that particular artwork in the Krollemolle Museum. I'd actually had very little sleep, but that is in the Netherlands. And if we go this way, sorry, I think we need to go the other way. Sorry, no, not that way. That is just around the corner from that particular cafe. Yeah. That is the hospital where he would be treated for his ear. That's also very close to that particular cafe. It's quite close to it. Just trying to see. This is in all. This is what it looks like inside all. That's all as well. That's the girl that chaperoned me through the streets. And this is where she kind of said, thanks, I'm going to go that way. You need to go that way. And that was where I was staying, very Van Gogh accommodation. I originally was going to travel with someone, or I thought, and then I chose a really nice spot. And then when I was traveling by myself, I chose a very ordinary spot. So just like Van Gogh, I'll give you the best room, blah, blah, blah. There's the bull rink. So anyway, I'm just reviewing some of the photos, but I did know that I had one of the pictures of that particular cafe terrace, right? Then he says I've been less harried by unnecessary annoyances. So can you see, according to his own words, he's feeling good. He's feeling physically. He's given himself a clean bill of health, physical health. But he's also saying, my work is improving. I'm feeling less stressed. What does harried mean? I'm feeling less pressured, less rushed. I'm feeling calm. I'm not feeling annoyed or irritated. So he's in a good place right here, like in the middle of the month. He says, only if, as I hope, I take more pains with the style and quality of my work, it will go a little more slowly. Or rather, I shall have to keep the pictures with me longer. That is, if they are subjects that are connected and complement each other, and also because there will be some pictures which I certainly do not want to send you till they are bone dry. In this last category, there is a square size 30 canvas, a corner of a garden with a weeping tree, grass, round clipped cedar shrubs, and an oleander bush. The same corner of the garden, that is, which you have already had a study of in the last parcel. But this one is bigger. There's a citron sky of everything, and also the colors have the richness and intensity of autumn. And besides it is an even heavier paint than the other one, plain and thick. That is picture number 1 this week. I don't know. I'm not terribly impressed with that. I don't know what you guys think. Not terribly impressive. Let's see if we can get a better version of that. Maybe we're just getting a bit of a distorted version of it. Doesn't look like there any. I don't know. It looks like we can't really make the excuse that the picture quality is not that great. It is what it is. I mean, this is marginally better. It's very green, isn't it? Everything is green. Anyway, let's go back to the letter. Yeah, it doesn't really do it for me either. Letty says, why is Van Gogh not working and instead always seems to need money from his brother? Well, oh, you mean not working like a regular job? I guess you could say that Theo is essentially like Vincent's enabler. So Theo has given up arguing with his brother or reasoning with his brother, and what he basically does is he believes in his brother, and I think with some support, right? But instead of he just lets Van Gogh do what he wants to, and basically sends him money. And I guess he's kind of just hoping for the best, but you kind of get the idea that Theo at this point is kind of distracted, that Theo's not really gonna um, uh, sort of the Afrikaans is where you interfere with someone else's salad. He's not going to really, because he's kind of thinking about other things and he's distracted, just sort of just going along with what Van Gogh wants. And maybe he does see some potential with Gauguin. Maybe he thinks Gauguin is going to be a critical thing that is going to change things, and in a way he does. I mean, I think it's a interesting question to say. Timmy, can I put you down? I think it's an interesting question to say, if Van Gogh and Gauguin had never crossed paths, right? Would Van Gogh be the famous artist that he is today, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if because Gauguin became Gauguin, and I think he would have anyway, right? Um, and I think in a way both artists have helped one another become famous. But what I'm trying to say is, if Van Gogh didn't lose his ear, didn't go to the asylum, and didn't commit suicide, so in other words, if Van Gogh never met Gauguin, right, and he never lost his ear, never went to the asylum, and never died the way that he died, I don't know whether Van Gogh would be anywhere near the superstar that he is today. And so, in a way, you can credit Gauguin with some of his stardom, I think, in a weird way. Does that make sense? But it's a good question you've asked there. Okay, let's continue. So he says, he talks about the outside of a cafe with a terrace lit up by a big gas lamp in the blue light and a corner of a starry blue sky. You can see before he painted Starry Night, he was already painting starry skies, and he actually painted quite a few. He painted Starry Night over the Rhone. He painted stars over cypresses. He painted a couple of starry night skies. Then he talks about a third picture is a portrait of himself. You kind of also get the sense, I mean, how long has it been since he's painted a self-portrait? You kind of get the sense that in the same time that he's thinking about this house, what it's going to represent, what it's going to be, what he wants to happen in this room, that room, who he's going to be, who someone else is going to be. He's thinking of himself. He's thinking of himself as a concept. He's thinking of himself almost outside of himself, and hence he paints the self-portrait, because he's trying to figure out who he is as well and who he wants to be in the context of this house and a potential companion. Who am I? That's kind of what he's thinking about. He says, almost colorless in ashen tones against a background of pale Veronese green. I purposely bought a mirror good enough to enable me to work from my image in default of a model. So he's bought a mirror, and now he looks at the mirror. Now just think about that. Seems like he hasn't had a mirror all this time. Now, you might say, you know what? I understand Van Gogh has sort of been a little, he hasn't had a lot of luxuries in his life. But would you imagine going without a mirror? Right? So he says, I purposely bought a mirror to, so obviously when he says good enough, he might have a little mirror that's not, like a little mirror like this size. Oh, I've got some dirt on my cheek or whatever. But now he's got a mirror good enough to do self-portraits. But I mean, don't most homes in the world have a mirror large enough where you could see yourself, and if you really wanted to do self-portrait? He hasn't even had that. He says, If I can manage to paint the coloring of my own head, which is not to be done without some difficulty, I shall likewise be able to paint the heads of other good souls, men and women. The problem of painting night scenes and effects on the spot and actually by night interests me enormously. This week I've done absolutely nothing but paint and sleep and have my meals. That means sittings of 12 hours at a stretch. So there's another glimpse at Van Gogh's schedule, and you kind of get the idea that he's very motivated, he's very positive, he's in a really good state of mind, right? So would you want to change your vote at this point? Like we've gone through basically two letters now. And do you remember what you voted? Did you vote that he's becoming less stable? Would you want to change your vote? If you haven't voted, what do you think you would want to vote? Is he becoming more stable and is he in a good place or not? What do you guys say? What do you guys say? I think I need to quickly look at what you guys have voted. I can't quite see it. Let's pull it up. So 67% have said that he's less stable. Anyone want to change your vote? So almost three quarters of you, almost 70%, say that you think that he's become less stable, right? So Chelsea says, yeah. Lisa says I need to change. Snowline says, yeah, I think he's becoming more stable for sure. Snowline says becoming more stable. Mel says it's too soon to tell, but we're talking about in this little window of the correspondence. So I mean, we've got one more letter to go through, and then we'll continue. But might be too soon. Zircon says, I think I'm wrong. Change to stable. Lisa says more stable. Sharon says I need to change my vote. And maybe you'll be feeling despondent in the next letter, but at this point, and I've been saying it for a while, at this point, he's is very physically robust. He keeps telling everyone how much stronger he's feeling. He's just told his sister that he is giving himself a clean bill of health, basically, and is talking very positively about how free he is in his mind and he's not annoyed by things and blah blah blah. He's in a very good space, right? Then he says, he goes on to say, I read in the literary supplement of Saturday's Figaro, I think that's a French paper, the description of an impressionist house. This house is built with bricks, as it were like the bottoms of bottles of convex glass, violet glass. With the sunshine reflected in it and the yellow refractions, the effect was incredible. To support these walls of glass bricks shaped like violet-colored eggs, they had invented a support of black and gilt iron, representing the weird branches of Virginia creeper and other climbing plants. This violet house was right in the middle of a garden where all the paths of bright, where all the paths were of bright yellow sand. The ornamental flower borders were, of course, most unusual in coloring. The house is, if I remember correctly, in O'Toole. Without changing anything in this house, either now or afterward, I want all the same to make it an artist's house through the decorations. That will come. A good handshake. I went for a splendid walk today by myself among the vineyards. Again, just that final sentence, what does that tell you? He's in a really good space. He's in a really good place. Who wouldn't be? Like, if you think about it, who wouldn't be in a great space if you've been painting and someone else is basically your patron who's paying for a double-story house that where you're going to have a studio and you're going to have a bed and there's going to be another space for another artist And I mean, who wouldn't be really in love with that idea, especially if you're an artist, right? Um, Giving him this opportunity is like recognizing him as having slightly higher, maybe not even slightly, significantly higher status than he's had up until this point, right? And he's feeling like, in a way, like he's somebody, right? I won't say for the first time in his life, but it hasn't been very often in his journey that he feels like he's a somebody. And of course, in 3 months, that fairy tale is going to be totally devastated because he's going to be made to feel like a nobody. The person that is expecting to join him is going to abandon him, basically stab him in the back. The village folk are going to treat him like scum. But right now, he feels on top of the world, right? And wouldn't anybody, wouldn't you feel like, wow, I've finally got a home. I finally belong somewhere, right? So, like, I don't think Van Gogh was crazy or hallucinating or mentally unstable or unreasonable or irrational to feel hopeful. Do you? I mean, under those circumstances, wouldn't any person, the average person, be somewhat positive about the future, right? Or is he like becoming mentally ill, thinking, well, you know what, things are actually looking quite cool? No, you're mentally ill to think that. No, you're mad to be in a good mood because you're going to be moving into this house. You're mad. No, you're not. You are. Anybody would feel that way, right? He's finally beginning to feel at home in the world, and that is a nice feeling. He's saying, I don't feel annoyed. I don't feel unsettled. I feel calm, right? And he goes for a walk. Um, he goes for a walk among the vineyards, and it's the world seems like a great place. And if I may be a little bit indulgent, on my very last day in Boise, um, on my very last day in Boise, remember I'd attended the Laurie Vallow trial. On the very last day, I was interviewed by Nate Eaton. Um, I think her name's Angela Kerndall of was it CBS Two, and then also uh, what is it? Core TV. So on my very last day, the three TV channels kind of interviewed me, and that was my last day. And then for the first time, I just went for a walk through Boise. I'd never really done that, and I went to the sort of Capitol building, but I was also sort of walking through the vineyards, and it felt splendid. And I thought, wow, this has come to such a great ending. What a great way to what a great note to end this part of my journey on. And then it wasn't quite as great as I thought. The footage I don't think ever aired on court TV, and what Nate recorded eventually put up when the trial ended. The only one who actually interviewed me and then put it up then and there was Angela Kerndall, which I'm really grateful for, right? But what I'm saying is, I was also kind of in a great space, but only to feel a little let down and a little disappointed afterwards. Um, am I wrong to feel that way? I mean, would you have felt that way, or what? Right? Okay, so let's now deal with the letter from the 17th September. It's quite a short one, looks like. Is there a letter from Gauguin after that? There's another letter from the 17th September. And another one. Three letters from the same day. Well, I would have loved to have dealt with one more letter besides this, but anyway, let's just deal with one or two of these letters. Okay. Snowline says, I really like that interview. Cool. Okay, so he says, Dear Theo, I'm inclined to think that the letter Gauguin wrote you throws a clear light on the question. But I should not like to rely on the word of an artist of his merit when he says, you will have to pay my traveling expenses and my debts if you want me to come, for I myself have not got any money. So that is what Gauguin has said. A dick move, right? Now, what is quite interesting in the previous two letters, this letter and this letter, is there's virtually no reference to Gauguin. I mean, I think he says here, I will arrange one of these rooms to accommodate a friend, but it doesn't actually mention Gauguin's name at all, as far as I remember. Does he say anything about Gauguin here? I don't think so. And so it kind of gets through two letters where he's feeling quite good. And then this letter is not in such a good space anymore. He says, you know what? I don't know whether I really like what's going on here. He says, on the other hand, if this is the case, he ought to be very generous with his pictures. So Vincent's saying, you know, this is really a dick move from Gauguin, but maybe you can convince him that he is gonna owe you a lot of pictures, and you can totally imagine Van Gogh making that argument, because Van Gogh's kind of been making that argument all along, which is, I know you're sending me money, but don't worry, I'm going to work really, really hard, and there are going to be lots of pictures, and they're bound to sell, and then they don't sell. And then some time goes by, and then he makes the same argument. You know what? I've been working really, really hard, and even if I don't sell any of them, it's really good because it means I've developed as an artist, and then in the future, my art will absolutely sell, and your money will be an absolute investment in that. It's that argument, but now applied to another artist. He's saying, you know what? Even though you're going to be throwing good money after bad, or even though you're going to be giving a lot of money to this guy, even paying for his debts, don't worry, he's going to be painting a shitload of pictures, right? That's his argument. So he says, so that's that. However, in any case, there would have to be money. Yeah, of course. But then I don't see much harm in the business. But those pictures which will be sold one day may freeze the interest on the purchase money invested for years to come. As a matter of fact, so now he's kind of saying, you know what, you're really getting a great investment here. So what you're going to do is you're going to be paying money, but guess what? Even though the pictures don't sell for a long time, you're going to freeze the relatively low cost of making those pictures, so that when they do eventually sell, it's going to make a really great profit. He is a really good, I don't want to say bullshitter, but he's a really good negotiator in a sense. Anyway, so he goes on to say, as a matter of fact, a picture for which you pay 400 francs today and which you sell for 1,000 francs after 10 years will still be sold at the current price, as all that time nothing could be done with the money. Well, you know this better than I should not be surprised if little by little you regained your love for business, or at least if you got reconciled to your present situation, as soon as you feel that the inventors of new things in commerce do not know how to produce a great revolution in it. When he talks about that, he really is recognizing what is going on in the modern world. There's a lot that is being invented. Photography, there are great developments in engineering. Electrical lights electricity is about to come online. He says, you are good to the artist. You are in the very center of the trade. You do what you can. You are damned right. Only take care of your health if you can, and don't get into a stew over nothing. Now, if it must come, it'll come of its own accord. I only want to stress the point that it appears to me that if Gauguin deposited his pictures exclusively with you and calmly awaited his hour, working with me here, so I've got a bit of the sniffles, and if he paid us for our out-of-pocket expenses with his work, he would be pursuing a policy that I would respect more than any other he might adopt. With regard to Bernard, if Bernard should want to come here, it would not be on the same terms as Gauguin, at least so it seems to me. So he seems to be saying you get a better deal with Bernard coming here. He doesn't have debts. He's not so high maintenance. He wouldn't be so demanding. Of course, Bernard's not really up to snuff really as an artist, right? Welcome, Stephanie. By the way, Stephanie L is keeping up to date with the Titan submersible. So I wonder whether you guys know about that. I've got another update to put up on there. I might do that after this. Anyway, welcome. For those who don't know, Stephanie and Chris, um, sort of, we went through the Met together and the Guggenheim, and I spent my last hours in New York with them, and it was really good. We must go back to that Moroccan restaurant sometime. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, welcome, Stephanie L. So he says, if living together should be to his advantage, nothing would prevent you agreeing to buy something from him from time to time, if it is possible. But no arrangement of any sort with him, for he is too fickle. Who do you think he's talking about when he says that? Who's too fickle? Gauguin or Bernard? What do you guys think? If Gauguin should not come, he will succeed all the same, but then he will not succeed by means of his combining, but through the intrinsic merits of his canvases. If only he goes on having the time, the money, and the liberty necessary to paint them. Can you see how, when Van Gogh's not talking about Gauguin, is quite happy? He's sort of really poetic in his descriptions, and it's a really interesting subject matter. But as soon as it comes to Gauguin, it's complaints and difficulties and struggles and what is actually going on with this guy. Can you see it's sort of starts tying them in knots, right? Don't you get that sense? And this is when, sorry, this is before Gauguin's even literally in the picture. Gauguin's like somewhere else trying to make up his mind. If Gauguin's tying them in knots and he's not even there, what do you think he's going to do when he is there? Right? So he says, what does he say? I assure you that under the present circumstances, I should not be a better businessman than you are. So much is certain, and so much you know too. Only I should like to send you better pictures. This I endeavor to do, and this I shall go on endeavoring to do. Very soon the hour will come for me to resume my painting in the garden. That's not too bad. I think I've actually been to that garden in all. Anyway, he says, it's a tremendous advantage for me not to be short of canvases and paints. And so it is my bounden duty to work on indefatigably, without becoming tired. If Gauguin should come, I think we might try to make our colors at home. I dare not do it. I dare not do it alone, for I'm afraid of getting discouraged if I do not succeed at once. I'm very curious. That's quite interesting. Is that Van Gogh doesn't seem to know how to make colors, but Gauguin does know how to do it, I guess. I'm very curious to know what price Tanguy will ask for his tubes. Did you read in the number of the Courrier Français that you sent me an article entitled La Tresse Bleue? Very good. It just makes one think of Segatori. No doubt you will read this article with pleasure. Then this is like the same day. He says, my dear Theo, I wrote to you already early this morning. Then I went away to go with a picture of a garden in the sunshine. Then I brought it back and went out again with a blank canvas, and that also is finished. And now I want to write to you again. because I've never had such a chance, nature here being so extraordinarily beautiful. So can you see here, he's not talking about Gauguin, and he's starting to be in a positive frame of mind again, right? He says, everywhere and all over the vault of heaven is a marvelous blue, and the sun sheds a radiance of pale sulphur, and it is soft and as lovely as the combination of heavenly blues and yellows in a Vandermeer of Delft. I cannot paint it as beautifully as that, but it absorbs me so much that I let myself go, never thinking of a single rule. Right? Look at those words. It absorbs me so much that I let myself go, never thinking of a single rule. Now, you know what is so incredible with this is that Van Gogh is captivated, entranced, hypnotized by nothing more or less than the sun in the sky. Is He's stirred, inspired, captivated, entranced, all those words again, by the sheer radiance of the sun in the sky. It's not like he's in the Himalayas and he's like, wow, what an incredible amphitheater, right? Or he's seeing the Grand Canyon. He's simply um, captivated by the sun throbbing in the sky. Isn't that incredible? He says, um, the sun sheds a radiance of pale sulfur, and it is soft and as lovely as the combination of heavenly blues and yellows in a Vandermeer of Delft. He says it's extraordinarily beautiful. And of course, he's in the very, very late summer of France, and very, very late summer is often a beautiful time, right? Uh, Snowline says, to be honest, I've always liked Gauguin's paintings because I love the tropics. I also really like Gauguin's paintings, although I think he's a total asshole. Okay, so he says, that makes 3 pictures of the gardens opposite the house, then the 2 cafes, and then the sunflowers, then the portrait of Bach and of myself, then the red sun over the factory. That painting has been lost. And the men unloading sand and the old mill. Where's that? Um, okay, that one. And the old mill. Okay. Not to mention the other studies. You see that I've got some work behind me, but my paints, my canvas, and my purse are all completely exhausted today. Basically, I need more money. He says the last picture done with the last tubes of paint on the last canvas of a garden. Green, of course, is painted without green, nothing but Prussian blue and chrome yellow. I'm beginning to feel that I'm quite a different creature from what I was when I came here, right? So if there's any doubt about his state of mind, well, now he's going to reiterate what his state of mind is. Again, the question, is he feeling unstable? Is he becoming more unstable, right? Gauguin isn't there yet. Is he becoming more or less unstable? And I see less stable is at 68%. Almost 30% of you say either more stable or it's hard to say, right? But now listen to what he says. He's saying after I think he arrived in February, March. So let's say he was there March, April, May, June, July, August, September. After 7 months, 6, 7 months in all, he's saying, I'm a different creature. And so when he paints himself looking like a Japanese person, I think that's also an acknowledgement that I am different. I've been here for so long that I'm healthier, I'm happier, I'm a different creature, right? Well done. Intercoastal Carissa says, I voted more stable. Well done. It also helps to have voted a little bit later on. So Yeri says, I have no doubt, no hesitation in attacking things, and this may increase. But what a country, right? When he says attacking things, he means taking on whatever he has in mind to paint, right? That's kind of what he means, right? So he says, I'm in a public garden quite close to the street of the kind girls, and Murier, for instance, hardly ever went there. Although we took a walk in the gardens practically every day, but on the other side, there are three. But you realize it is just this that gives a touch of boccaccio to the place. I really don't know what he means when he says kind girls. I don't know whether he means hookers. I'd somehow imagine that he does. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think he means by that? Because there is a brothel just around the corner from where he was staying, or there was at the time. Anyway, he says, but this side of the garden is also for the same reason of chastity or morality. So if he's talking about chastity, like one paragraph after referring to kind girls, what do you think he's thinking about? Anyway, he says, destitute of any flowering bushes such as the oleanders, they are ordinary plain trees, pines in stiff clumps, a weeping tree, and the green grass, but it is all so intimate. Manet has gardens like this. As long as you can manage to bear the burden of all this paint and canvas and all the money that I spend, keep on sending it. Now, what I want to also emphasize at this point is Stephanie says, I'd love to see the French word as it may be the translation of kind. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think they use a bit of license. So one of the explanations for why Van Gogh took his own life is that he couldn't bear to be a burden to his brother, right? So, like the number one reason why Van Gogh felt like, you know what, I'm a I'm going to take myself out, right? Is well, he was going to be a financial burden to his brother at a time that was very tricky for his brother. His brother just gotten married. His brother had a 1-year-old infant or a new child, newborn baby, right? And there was also a little bit of trouble at work with his brother, where his brother was thinking of, his brother felt like, I'm not really getting paid enough for the work I'm doing, and maybe I need to change jobs, right? Right. And so if you speak to art experts and you say, can you just tell me in a nutshell, why did Van Gogh take his own life? They'll say, it's simple. He didn't want to be a burden to his brother, and he was being a burden to his brother, right? Then you say, okay, but he has a letter right over here, right? Less than 2 years earlier, where he was being a massive burden to his brother. His brother was paying, like, he didn't have to have his own studio and a studio for somebody else. And he was asking for large amounts of money regularly. Can I have another 300 francs? Can I have 500 francs? I need to buy a second bed as well. I need to furnish this house, right? Yeah, he was being a massive burden to his brother, right? And he says to him right here, he says, can you manage me being a burden to you? Because besides the furniture and the house and everything, can you please keep sending me painted canvases? His brother didn't say, look, you're being a little bit of a burden to me right now. I'll send you money for furniture, but just stop painting for a while. I can't pay for both. But his brother doesn't say that. His brother just sends stuff. And now the burden even extends to Gauguin, where it's like, can you send Gauguin to me? Like, he can't pay his own way here. And he's got debts. Do you mind kind of covering those as well? That's not going to be too much of a burden for you, is it? And so it's like, oh, so this wasn't a burden to Theo in September 1888, but in the summer of 1890, suddenly Van Gogh is this huge burden to his brother, where he's staying in an inn, in a small little box in an inn, and all he's asking for is for him to send paints, and that's all. He's not asking for furniture. He's not asking for rent for another place. He's not asking to look after another artist. In fact, that's not actually true. The very last letter he sent to his brother, he said, "Oh, the dude next to me also needs some paint, so I'm gonna I'm going to make a little bit of a bigger order than usual. And so that is the bullshit art expert nonsense for why Van Gogh took his own life. That's the official mainstream bullshit story for why he took his own life. Yeah, you can see just how nonsensical that is. And the amazing thing with bullshit narratives is like it's a little bit complicated to unbullshit them, to diffuse them. I mean, I've just had that with Madeleine McCann, where people say, "Did you really just say that it's very strange that someone would take a 3-year-old child?" It happens all the time. In fact, there are, and it's the P word, there are P's all over the world, and children are being abducted left, right, and center. And it's like, actually, no, less than 1% of that is less than, I don't know if I can say it here without being demonetized, less than 1% of stranger abductions, sorry, less than 1% of abductions are stranger abductions. And yet the there are a lot of people in the true crime community, sorry to jump ship a little bit, but there are a lot of people in the true crime community, I would almost imagine even the majority would say, oh, a child has disappeared. Oh, Kylie Rodney's disappeared. Oh, John Benet Ramsey disappeared. It must be a stranger who did it. It can't be a family member. No, it's got to be a stranger. Like that is the default mainstream narrative. And so if a child disappears tomorrow, it must have been a stranger. No, it's the opposite. And you had the same thing quite recently in when Nora Corrin disappeared. It was also all the Madeleine McCann experts came there to say, oh, she must have been abducted in Malaysia. And then she was found in the forest like a mile away. No sign of any injury. And then there was this insistence that although there was no proof that how can I put it? There was no proof that she was abducted. There was no proof that she wasn't, if that makes sense. Well, and so what I'm trying to say, it's the same nonsensical bullshit that you have in true crime, that PR has just created this perception that you have in the Van Gogh story as well. You just have people blindly repeating the same bullshit narrative, and that's how you end up with a bullshit narrative, right? Let's see if there's anyone here who's going to criticize what I've just said. Anyway, okay, so let's continue. Right, so he says, because the stuff I'm getting ready will be better than the last batch, and I think we shall make something on it instead of losing. If only I can manage to do a coherent whole. That is what I'm trying to do. And you kind of get the idea that at this point, he sort of feels like he's on the cusp of something. He's about to come into his own. And in a way, he is, right? He says, but it is quite out of the question that Thomas would send me 200 or 300 francs on my studies. That would let me make a profit of 1,000 on it. For I cannot tell you often enough, I'm ravished with what I see. Just see. Bridget says, I must drag myself away from this beautiful distraction, get ready for my mother's funeral. Wow, that's really sad to hear, Bridget. Check the music and read the eulogy. Guys, let me just pause for a second. Our thoughts are just all with Bridget for now. I mean, this is a serious and sad moment for Bridget. So really sorry to hear about that, Bridget. It's quite a shocking thing to just read just like that. But we do wish you luck, and we hope that it's going to be an appropriate, proper send-off, and you know, the right way to acknowledge your mother. Kimberly says, sorry for your loss. Stephanie says, sending hugs. Thanks, guys. Anyway, we'll be thinking of you, Bridget. I've kind of met some of my patrons and so on during this trip, and it's really been incredible, very moving, very touching, hearing about your personal and private struggles, from a father who's died to someone who had multiple strokes to someone whose mother abandoned the family because they became a Scientologist. All of us have got our own struggles. And I think when I think about my current struggles right here where I am, it's encouraging. And Vincent van Gogh definitely encourages me where you think, well, like you might be feeling despondent and upset and alone and whatever, troubled. And then you realize, well, Vincent van Gogh didn't have an easy life. It's life sometimes. And I know some of you as well have had great difficulties. And so we definitely think about Bridget. But I think that is why Van Gogh is quite soothing and, what's the word that I'm looking for? It sort of makes you feel, you don't feel alone in the sense that you're in a particular kind of predicament, if that's the word, where you feel misunderstood, but not because there's something wrong with you, right? It's just life sometimes. Silent Murmur says Vincent is a relatable person. Yeah, it's kind of a feeling of you feel almost like the feeling you get by being soothed. You almost feel. See if I can find a. What's the word I'm looking for? You feel comforted. I think that's the word. You feel comforted. You feel reassured that this has happened to others and it's not fair and it's not right, but it does happen. And if anything, I think one can look at Van Gogh's story and the way that he takes it on himself actually aggravates the thing. So in other words, if you look at the ear incident and then he goes into the asylum and where he ends up, shouldn't you actually at some point stand up for yourself or leave the environment that you're in? Do you know what I mean? Like if you look at where Van Gogh is right now and you say, how could he have avoided the tragedy that we know is in store for him? Well, what if after the ear incident, he basically said, I need to be near family, or even before the ear incident said, I can't force this relationship to work, or I can't, this thing that I had my hopes pinned on isn't working out. What if he just let go of that and said, you know what, I've put so much into this, but I'm going to just let it go anyway. I'm glad that Bridget can get a bit of support and friendship and love and comfort from us. Really, that really does mean something to me. Yeah, comfort is the word that I'm looking for. Mel Stiller says Vincent makes me feel that I'm not alone in my own struggles. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's something that he didn't really have, that he was trying to have, was community. I mean, this whole thing with inviting Gauguin there, it was the beginning of starting a community. And of course, I didn't have the internet then. I didn't have social media then, right? Karina says, his spirit is so strong that builds me up, always his positive tenacity. I mean, one of the things with Team Peachtree is this idea that um, of growing despite the fact that the sun's not shining, and the sun might be shining on someone else. Someone else is just having things easy and simple and whatever. But your situation is far more challenging. But you grow and um, you have hope, and you dig in and you put your roots down and you reach for the sky regardless, right? And if there's a champion for that sort of thing, it is Van Gogh, someone who paints and he just believes he's on the right track and he just perseveres. And he says, even if I don't sell my art, um, it is worth, what I'm doing is worth something, even if I don't sell it. Like, money is not the only arbiter of value. Like, the sunshine's not the only arbiter. I can also give value to my existence. I can also um, I can't think. I can also not justify myself. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? I used to know this word so well. What's the word when you give yourself credit? It's not justify. What word am I looking for? You can, it's not vindicate, not legitimize. What word am I looking for? Validate, right? You can validate yourself. And so that's kind of what Van Gogh does, is he sort of validates his own art. And ultimately it is valid. Ultimately it takes a while for the world to catch up. That's it. And so you don't need to get that validation from someone else. You can give it to yourself. Obviously, if it's authentic, then it's good enough. Okay, let's finish up with these letters. Um, he says, today while I was working, I thought a lot about Bernard. His letter is steeped in admiration for Gauguin's talent. He says that he thinks him so great an artist that he's almost afraid, and that he finds everything that he does himself poor in comparison with Gauguin. And you know that last winter Bernard was always picking quarrels with Gauguin. However this may be, and whatever happens, it is very comforting that these artists are our friends. But yeah, we've been talking about comfort. He's also comforted by the struggles of his fellow artists. And I dare say they will remain so, however the business turns out. I'm so happy in the house and in my work that I even dare to think that this happiness will not always be limited to one, but that you will have a share in it, and good luck to go with it. So can you see again, there he says it in plain black and white. I'm so happy. I'm so happy in the house. I'm so happy in my work. I'm even daring to think that this happiness might go beyond me. It might extend to you, right? Some time ago, I read an article on Dante, Petrarch, Boccaccio, Giotto, and Botticelli. Good Lord, it did make an impression on me reading the letters of those men. And Petrarch lived quite near here in Avignon, and I'm seeing the same cypresses and oleanders. I've tried to put something of that into one of the pictures painted in a very thick impasto, citron yellow and lime green. Giotto moved me most, always in pain, and always full of kindness and enthusiasm, as though he were already living in a different world from ours, right? So he's moved by Giotto because that's what he's going through. Although he's in pain, he's always kind and enthusiastic. is in a way transcending his circumstances. He says, besides, Giotto is extraordinary, and I understand him better than the poets Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio. I wonder if we can look for a quick painting by Giotto. Artworks. Well, I'm not sure if they're terribly good. Here is Kiss of Judas by Giotto. It's quite incredible the depth of Van Gogh's art knowledge is pretty damn incredible. He's talking about this artist. Anyway, that's one of the pictures he painted, the Kiss of Judas. Okay. I always think that poetry is more terrible than painting, though painting is a dirty and a much more worrying job. And then the painter never says anything. He holds his tongue, and I like that too. And I think there's something to read into that, where he says, the painter never says anything. He holds his tongue, and I like that too. Do you think there's anything anything beyond those words? Like think about those words in connection to the ear incident. Does he ultimately hold his tongue about what happened there? And I'm giving something away, but after the ear incident, he said to Gauguin, I'm going to hold my tongue about what happened, literally. When the police came after the gunshot, he didn't want to talk about it either. And it's because he has this idea of a painter as someone who basically holds his tongue, someone who a lot is going on beneath the surface, and he doesn't need to say a lot. He can write a lot and he can paint a lot, but he's not going to say a lot, right? It's quite interesting, I think. My dear Theo, when you have seen the cypresses and the oleanders here and the sun, the day will come, you may be sure, then you will think even more often of the beautiful Dupuis by Puvis de Chavannes. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Let's see if I can find that. See if I can find that artwork. I hope this is worth finding. It's not too bad. So this is what he's talking about. Just amazing what art he knows off the top of his head, right? So there it is. People bathing. Looks like a very, very old painting. Well, looks like it's from maybe 1882, but it looks like it's from before then. Anyway, he says there's still a great deal of Greece all through the Tartarian and Dumier part of this queer country, where the good folk have the accent, you know. There's a Venus of old, just as there's a Venus of Lesbos, and one still feels the youth of it in spite of all. I haven't the slightest doubt that someday you too will know the South. Perhaps you will go see Claude Monet when he is in Antibes. Or anyway, you will find some opportunity. When we have the Mistral down here, that's the wind, right? However, it is the exact opposite of a sweet country, for the Mistral sets one on edge. But what compensations when there's a day without wind? What intensity of color, what pure air, what vibrant serenity. So again, it seems like the Mistral has sort of settled down for the moment, right? But you really get a strong sense of serenity from Van Gogh at this moment, right? Tomorrow I'm going to draw until the paints come, but I've deliberately arrived at the point where I will not draw a picture with charcoal. that's no use. You must attack drawing with the color itself in order to draw well. To me, I think Stephanie L wants to see what you look like. So come, jump up. Come up. Hey, come. I know you want me to go to bed, but I need to finish this. Come, Tommy, come up. Jump. Come, boy. Come. Come, boy. Come. Come, boy. Come on. Come on. Come. Come, boy. Come. Come, boy. You're embarrassing me. Jump up. Come, jump. Come. Up. There you go. So, Stephanie, this is my dog. He's a little in need of grooming. He's probably in need of a bit of a bath and a nap, I guess. But anyway, yes, Timmy. Timmy's a little peed off with me because I didn't take him for a walk today, and today really is one of the coldest days so far this year. I actually went somewhere where I do normally take him, but the ducks are so tame that it's just impossible to relax because he goes for them, and the ducks like come right up to him. And then today, the ducks were sort of locked away, so I probably could have taken him somewhere. Timmy, Ralph wants to meet you. Timmy, do you want to go to Timmy? Do you want to go to New York? Hmm? Not sure if Timmy will like New York that much. He's used to um, grass underfoot, I guess is the right way to put it. I think maybe Ralph should come here. What do you say, Timmy? Hmm? Okay. Oh, Ralph wanted some pigeons. That's cool. There certainly are pigeons in New York. I saw quite a few on my way to the Freedom Tower. Anyway, he says, oh, the exhibition at the Revue Independente, good, but once and for all, we are too good smokers to put the wrong end of the cigar into our mouths. We shall be forced to try to sell in order to do the things we sell over again and better. That's because we are in a bad trade, but let's try something different from the fun of the fair that's the best of the house. This afternoon, I had a select public, 4 or 5 hooligans and a dozen street Arabs who were especially interested in seeing the paint come out of the tubes. Well, that same public, it meant fame, or rather, I mean to laugh at ambition and fame, as I do at those street Arabs and at the loafers on the banks of the Rhone and in the Rue du Pont d'Arles. This is also quite interesting. You might say, oh, okay, so Van Gogh didn't take his own life because of the burden thing. He was burdened because he couldn't sell his art, right? No. I understand. I think I know why Van Gogh took his own life. He was burdened by his failure, right? Look at what he says here. Um, I mean to laugh at ambition and fame, right? That's what he that's how he sees his situation. He's realistic, is hopeful, but is realistic. I think Ralph would prefer the country. There are a lot of wonderful beaches here that are dog friendly. Plettenberg Bay is a really good example. Um, and yeah, wildlife areas, I guess. Um, but yeah, he would have to first take the long haul flight here, which would probably be quite difficult. Okay, so he says, yesterday I was at Millier's. He's coming tomorrow, having stayed on for 4 days. I wish Bernard would go and do his military service in Africa because he would do some fine things then. I do not know what to say to him yet. He said he would exchange his portrait for one of my studies. Now he talks about Gauguin. He says, but he says he dare not do Gauguin as I asked him because he feels afraid in front of Gauguin. Look at those words. He feels afraid in front of Gauguin. Basically, Bernard has so much temperament. He is sometimes foolish and vicious, but I certainly have no right to reproach him with that because I myself know the same disorder of the nerves only too well, and I know that he will not reproach me either. If he went to Africa to join Millier would certainly receive him kindly, because Millier is a very faithful friend and makes love so easily that he comes near to despising love itself. What is Surat doing? Am I saying that right? I should not dare to show him the studies already sent, but the ones of the sunflowers and the cabarets and the gardens, I would like him to see those. I often think of his method, though I do not follow it at all. But he is an original colorist, and Signac too, though to a different degree. Their stippling is a new discovery, and at all events, I like them very much. So can you see he's very aware of how other painters are painting. He's very aware of those different styles. But I myself, I tell you frankly, am returning more to what I was looking for before I came to Paris. I do not know if anyone before me talked about suggestive color, but Delacroix and Monticelli, without talking about it, and then did it. But I've got back to where I was in Noonan. Really, I'm not sure if I am following him here. When I made a vain attempt to learn music, so much did I already feel the relation between our color and Wagner's music. It is true that in Impressionism I see the resurrection of Eugene Delacroix, but the interpretations of it are so divergent and in a way so irreconcilable that it will not be Impressionism which will give us the final doctrine. That is why I myself remain among the Impressionists, because it professes nothing and binds you to nothing. And as one of the comrades, I need not declare my formula. Good Lord, how you have to mess about in life. I only ask for time to study, and do you yourself really ask for anything but that? But I think that you also can you see that when he says that, he doesn't say, "Good Lord, I only ask that you let me sell a painting." He's not saying that. Sarah, okay, right? He's not so desperate that he's saying, "Good Lord, I only ask that you let me sell a painting." He's saying, "I just wish I had time to study." He says, "I think that you also, like me, must long to have the quiet necessary to study without prejudice." So he is feeling that, right? He is feeling that. "And I'm so afraid of taking it away from you by my demands for money." Well, there is a concession that he feels like is a burden to his brother, but not enough to have him not be a burden. He says, "I'm so afraid of taking it away from you by my demands for money." But isn't he kind of bullshitting his brother a little bit here? Because what does he say before that? It's quite a long letter, right? Is it the previous letter? I think it's the previous letter where he says, I'm trying to look for where he says something, "I don't want to be a burden to you." Is it in the same letter? There it is. It says, "As long as you can manage to bear the burden of all this paint and canvas, right? Please keep sending it." That's what he says in the first part of the letter, right? And then much further down, he says, "I'm so afraid of taking it away from you by my demands for money." Well, he's not so afraid he's not so afraid to do it that he doesn't ask him for money. in other words, he's saying, I'm aware that I'm a burden, but if you don't mind, I'm going to continue being a burden, right? Do you see that? And someone else reading that is going, oh, cheapers. Van Gogh is so aware that he's a burden, that he's actually is suffering from depression. He doesn't want to live anymore, right? He says, however, I make such careful calculations, and again today I found that with the 10 meters of canvas I'd calculated all the colors except one, the fundamental yellow. Can you see how in one line he says, I'm so afraid of taking it away by demands for money. And immediately after talking about that, he talks about, well, I need some canvas. If all my colors are used up at the same time, doesn't it prove that I know the relative proportions in my sleep? It is the same with drawing. I hardly measure at all. And that I'm definitely opposed to Corman, who says that if he did not measure it, he would draw like a pig. And then here he talks about money and what is needed for that and how much he's paying. Carpentering is very expensive here. I'm trying to get a frame for the size study canvas in light walnut. All the same, I think you did very well to buy so many stretchers. So he says here, I'm so afraid of taking life away from you by my demands for money. And then over here he says, all the same, I think you did well to buy so many stretchers. We need to have a certain number to be able to dry the canvases. Okay, so is Van Gogh so depressed because he's a burden to his brother? Is he so depressed because he's not selling his art? No, that was there anyway. So you're going to have to come up with some other reason why he was so depressed, that wasn't there all along. Anyway, he says, but don't let them get in your way by leaving them on the stretchers. You mustn't let the lot take up too much room. Carpentering is very expensive. Okay, then he says, I have again had to order five size 30 stretchers for the new canvas. They've already been made and I must go and get them. This will show you that I cannot get on without some money at this stage of the work. So it's another way of him saying, this is what I've done. I bought this. I need some more money. Well, what does he say just above that? I'm so afraid of what I'm doing in terms of my demands for money. Not really. He's just saying it. It's just words. He's just kind of trying to be polite. It's almost like saying, I'm sorry to have to ask you this, but can I blah, blah, blah. Well, you're not really, it's sorry, not sorry, right? Yeah. So Kimberly, you're right. He never once hesitated to ask. Laurie says, loving and appreciating everyone's insightful comments. Thank you, guys. Laurie, wonderful to have you here. Hope you're doing well. Is it a warm day in Myrtle Beach? I would imagine. Okay. I hope that this will always be so and that there's the fatal necessity of using up my paint and my canvas and my cash. All the same, be very sure it isn't that which will ruin us. Even if you, on your part, use up your purse and whatever is inside, it's not so good, but just tell me quietly, there's nothing left. He's saying, if it ever gets too much to me, just tell me, Vincent, there's nothing left. I can't give you any more. For there will be some more because of what I've done with it. And supposing you say very rightly, and meanwhile I shall go on drawing, because doing nothing but drawing is easier than painting. With a good handshake, what days these are. Not for what happens in them, but I feel so strongly that both you and I are neither in our decadence nor done for yet, nor shall we ever be. So can you see how he's really, really positive? He's really in a good place. He's encouraging his brother, right? It's like, although he says what days these are, it's almost like he's saying, what days are these? It doesn't matter what's happening in them. I just feel so strongly about what's going to happen in the future. But I do not contradict the critics who will say that my pictures are not finished. With a handshake and goodbye for the present, ever yours, Vincent. How long is the next letter? I think it's a bit too long. And so guess what happens? He gets another 50 francs from Theo. Anyway, we will continue with this letter on Sunday, more than likely. We'll deal with the 17th September letter on Sunday. We're coming very close to Gaughin's arrival, which is in October. I don't think it's early October. I think it's somewhere like mid-October, maybe even late October. But that is where we're headed. But the point that I wanted to reinforce, to emphasize in this episode 60, is Van Gogh's in a good place. He's not unraveling. He didn't like stub his toe and went downhill from there. He's not drinking or going to brothels. He's in a really good place. And so again, it raises this question: did Gogh treat him really badly? Did Gogh gaslight him? Was Gogh an insensitive prick? Well, he seems to be even before he gets there, right? And so, just in general, when Van Gogh is by himself, isn't he okay? He may be not always very happy, but when Van Gogh is kind of by himself, isn't he kind of okay? And the thing that is his undoing is people that he loves that don't love him, or people that treat him like crap, or people that he feels don't treat him the way that he thinks he deserves. But on his own, he's okay. And so when he's in, when he comes into contact with somebody else, that's when he's vulnerable. And isn't that what happens? I mean, if you think so, if you think about it, isn't the best time for him to take his own life when he's in the asylum? He's lost his ear, he's alone, he's lost the yellow house, he's surrounded by strange, sick people screaming. He's in a horrible situation. Isn't that the best time to be miserable and depressed and to take your life? But the one thing that's not happening then is not being disappointed by anyone, is basically in his own mental instability, and he doesn't have to worry about anyone else's. And so when he goes to Orvez, what's different? Well, he meets Marguerite Gachet, maybe he likes her, a 21-year-old. He also meets Dr. Gachet and Dr. Gachet's son, and they kind of invite him into their home. And what happens when he's in that situation? Look how excited he got about the Yellow House. Now he's being invited into someone's home. Doesn't something really disappointing happen? Doesn't something very unfortunate happen? That's the question. Melstiller says financial transactions were part of the relationship. Robbie Robin says, what an episode that'll be when Gogh arrives. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is what's really incredible, is that one of the most beloved artworks, you can see it over my shoulder, in modern art, was painted under those circumstances. Pretty incredible. Well said, Laurie. Laurie says one must be very mindful of the company they keep. Yeah. Okay, so on that note, we at almost 2.5 hours. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here. Today has really been one of the coldest days so far, which is good news. It means can't get any colder. And I think today is the winter solstice here. So you guys are having your longest summer night, and we're having our longest winter night. And so from now on, the sun's going to be moving towards us and away from you. And it's all fair. You know, everyone in the world must get their little bit of sunshine, right? Their quota. Okay, cool. So it's been good having around about 30 of you, nice classroom size of you, watching episode 60, and hope to see many of you around about this time on Sunday for episode 61. Uh, really good to see both Stephanies in chat at the same time. It's always been one or the other. Really good to see you. Tomorrow says, does Timmy think you are talking to yourself? I don't know. I think Timmy just thinks when this happens, I get a free electric blanket, and that suits me just fine. This is Timmy time, right? Laurie says, thanks, Team Peachy, for this lovely last minute surprise. Thanks, guys. Okay, everybody, you must have a good rest of your Tuesday. And let's hope that before Thursday something happens with this search for the submersible. The scary part is if they find that submersible, it's not like it's the end of the story. They've got to get it to the surface. You know, it's not like you just find them and then the rescue's over. Once they find that submersible, then they've got to get them to the surface in time. I'm not sure if maybe there's a way that you can like send a pipe or something into it. I suppose there is, but if someone needs medical treatment or it's flooding or something, it's not just that you find it and then it's game over. You know, it's job done. They've still got to get them to where just to safety. So it really is I really think it's a pretty terrifying situation to be in. You know, another thing that is part of that situation is condensation. The longer you're in that cold cylinder, the more you've got condensation on the inside. It can't be terribly pleasant. Anyway, thanks a lot, Stephanie. It has been a good class. Thanks a lot, guys. So I'll see you guys around about this time, Sunday. Take care until then, and stay safe. Ciao. Timmy also says goodbye. Okay. Cheers, guys. Bye, Ralph.